This is just a brief video of an observation about the psychology of fake being mostly about the love of money, but also the love of power. So I've noticed what people do if you don't fall into a cultural realm. In America, we have the academics. Most people they judge everything according to academics. And I'm talking about Christians here now. I didn't mention that in my title. But we're talking about Christians mostly, but really everybody in a sense. You get judged according to academics, putting a stamp on something. And you don't have to have any character at all. I mean, you have to be polite to the right people, but nobody else. And in order to keep getting your paycheck, you have to just be, and to keep your reputation, to keep a resume. Don't ever talk to anybody your whole life, because you might say something or something could be said that might hurt your resume. Now, I understand some people believe in Proverbs and all that, but as far as when it says to hold your tongue and to be wise and all that, but this is from a different angle. And when in Proverbs, Solomon's teaching his son, somebody who's young, and he's really, a lot of the times he's saying to hold your tongue is when you're angry, right? You don't speak until you're not angry. Also, not to use many words, to be a listener, to be a student. And so I'm not saying that's the full interpretation of everything, but that's a lot of what he's dealing with. But when people don't talk their whole lives and they don't take a chance like Jesus did, he came to earth. Now we're talking about Christians here, but when he came to earth, he took a chance. I mean, he took a chance on suffering pain so he could talk to us. So to share, to communicate. Now, he's not us. He's God in the form of man. So, but for us, we not only he didn't need our bonding. He didn't need our help. We'll put it like that. He wants our bonding. He wants love. He wants to share love with us. But we have more, we potentially have more lonely times or needy times, definitely more needy times than Jesus did. And so we do rely on sometimes sharing with other people, relating to other people, or getting even approved to get paid, or getting a ride, getting food through other people's cooking, whether we have money to give them to pay them for getting the food, or whether they did a charity or something. So we have sometimes to take a break. Jesus could, I don't know that he did it all the time, but he could cook up food just by by a miracle, right? So I'm sure he went fishing. He did. I never thought about that actually, but he went fishing, and he had people fishing for him a lot of times. But sometimes, if he had to, he could do a miracle. He fasted 40 days and nights. He was tough. But the psychology of love your money. So in our society, if you don't do things by the book, you're kind of counted out. But we have a segregated society and an underground society, and partly because of the society that rejects folks that don't do things their way. And that's strange that we've bought into that, because our system, now I'm going to speak well of the system. The system, it helps do a lot of good things. It's good we have a system that's very productive. And so, but we've taught people to compete. There's a society out there. This is, glad I remembered this. This is perfect. What I thought about yesterday on this same subject. And this part right here. A lot of women, maybe more than men, but men fall for it. If you're not considered a human, or you're not considered acceptable, or even somebody acceptable to talk to, unless you can do those in a lot of cultures here. The Iron Man, I'll say the extreme side of the culture, of the academic culture. If you can't do an Iron Man and a triathlon, and not just that, but some of the military stuff, and the ones that are really risky too, where you're jumping into ice or something. I forget what they do, but you're doing all this crazy stuff that you could actually get hurt. And if you can't live up to that standard, then you're not even considered somebody worthy of talking to. And that's a culture. I've seen that culture, and so that's I have that in me to try to compete for that kind of stuff. I've used to want to compete for that kind of stuff, but I've had a different life. I've had a tougher life, and I've been glad to. I like to, I guess you could say, brag, or just. I think it's a fun story. I like this because I'm a guy who's tried to do a lot of stuff. I did 2,000 push-ups once, out of shape, but I just wanted. The problem is I didn't stay in shape like I wanted. I wanted to do 5,000, but in 3 hours. 10. I did 20 at a time at first, and I was getting kind of tired, so I took it down to 10 at a time. Didn't rush it, and but that's I've been into that. I thought I'm good at it. I'm gonna do something and set a standard, but people want me to just keep doing stuff like that, and do more to even be accepted. Something that I've known people who are into but they don't, because I don't do it all the time. I'm not consistent at it. I'm still not worth talking to. But at 2,000 is more push-ups than most people, right? I would think. So there's people like that. You're nothing, you're nobody. I write books, but really spiritual help books and truth books. Truth over misconception. I call out all the lies in society about when they lie about somebody being racist, and I point to where the real definition of racism, first of all. And that's if you don't believe we were one human race from God, Adam, and Eve, and that we all came from Noah's family after the flood, then if you don't believe that, then you're racist. Bottom line. So I call out realities like that, and that gets ignored by Christian academia. All the people. So what they have is a. This won't download if I don't hurry, but they actually have a pecking order, and they really what they tend to do is worship a lot of the fake Christian stuff. And I won't say they're totally fake. They could be deceived. I can't say who's completely fake, but they're following fake stuff. They have a pecking order, and they worship the boss thing. They worship rank. They worship ancestry, and that's the same thing that tribes that aren't educated do, right? Tribal nations, they do that, worship ancestry, but they worship authority and power. And in America, we have the ability to question whether our rules are neighborly, and then technically neighborly. Yeah, that's how well our Constitution was written. That's the purpose. That's the goal, to make sure it's neighborly for freedom sake, and liberty, and being moral and ethical under God. And so that's not a theocracy. Theocracy uses a certain church to steal people's freedom from speaking religion, and that's what we used to get hung for. That's why we created America. So, but you can't. But they recognized that they didn't want a theocracy when they made America, but they did recognize that we still need to be under God, acknowledge God, honor God, revere God, and that there's no other better laws than His love your neighbor laws within the Ten Commandments, and that Jesus taught the way He taught it in spirit and truth, and with forgiveness, redemption, reconciliation, all those things, right? So, but the love your neighbor laws technically are, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie against your neighbor, don't tell lies, and don't covet your neighbor's wife or their husband or property. So, I mean, that's all linked to not stealing, killing, and being greedy. And, there's the other commandments, but those are kind of the ones that are geared towards how we live with each other and our neighbors. And so I call them love your neighbor laws. And so thou shalt not commit adultery. That's a sin against your own self, or against somebody if you're in a relationship. And but the other ones are real crimes when you're doing a crime against somebody. So that's stuff we should enforce. Call them love your neighbor laws. And if you want to stay away from, you think it's leaning towards being too much of a theocracy by doing the whole Ten Commandments, of course we can't force you to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's something you have to choose. But the love your neighbor laws, to live peaceably and successfully, we need to have those. Okay, so I hope I didn't forget my other point. I've explained that in different ways on various videos as of recently, and I plan to do it over and over, actually. And but I forgot one of the points that I wanted to make real quick before I end this, that we tend to have, with people worship the academics. They worship the credentials. They worship those kind of things, and if you don't fit into that, you're out. But some people don't qualify. Me, I'm a person who does. I barely qualify. I'm on the edge of being able to be a top student. I couldn't be a top student, no matter if I studied all day and all night. There's a few subjects I could not be a top student. No way, no matter what. And so going to college for me is like, I'm just sitting there feeling like they're calling me stupid all the time. Basically, they are, right? I'm going there to get failed in speech class and everything else, right? So, I mean, I barely made it by. But I didn't want to go, but I went because it's what we're supposed to do. I had to go based on the culture I came from. So I wanted to build houses. If I didn't fall off a roof or something, I'd be a millionaire. In 1990, that's if I started doing that in 1990. I don't know about today. But back then, if I had done that, I'd have been wealthy. And there's other reasons. I'm not wealthy now, but that's for other reasons. I've studied. I'm not going to act like it's that noble. I've studied the underground world. It's not all that noble, but I've had an interest in the underground world. I felt like that it's not fair the way they're treated, and so. But I fell victim to a lot of that stuff, just to being robbed and things like that. And I sampled. I mean, so the bad part nobody's going to agree with is I sampled the products I did. So but I never was an addict. I was never an addict. Literally, never used more than the most I've ever used is 3 days in a row, right? And that's what, maybe three times in 30 years. But I usually wouldn't use more than a few hours or one day. And then I didn't want to anymore. But I was also broke because you get robbed. So but I was, I feel like the people I relate to actually are the victims out there. And they are victims. So I disagree with Candace Owens. I disagree with Republicans on some of their views, and some of that's libertarian views, and they skew everything. And so, but the truth is, here's the point. The point is, some things are not sins. We've deemed those kind of things sins, and they're not. But now, medicine can cause you to sin. They can. But medicine should be legalized and not in the devil's hands. It should be in regulated hands, and then you can crack down on addicts and things like that. But the truth is, people say they're addicts, they spend all their money on drugs, and the truth is they didn't. They got robbed. There's a thief market. It's a whole thief market, and then everybody assumes they spend all their money on drugs. So it's not honest. It's we believe in witchcraft. We've been duped. We're delusional. We think that medicine is a bad thing, and it is. It's a risky thing in that sense. But if you put it in the right hands, it's not as bad as it's going to be now. I mean, as it is now, it wouldn't be nearly as bad. So fentanyl is racist, I would say. And in some ways, when they're letting fentanyl across the border the way they do, that's racist against all Americans. And based on one context of the definition racist that people think is a real definition. So it's prejudice. Let's say it's prejudice. It's conspiring. All right. But the point is so people who don't qualify for college, in a sense, they're not college material, they can still choose to go if they have a certain thing they want to focus on. But for somebody like me, I still took the good and the bad from it. But I should have, there's other places that should fit in for me. It shouldn't be, our system does a lot of good stuff. Like I say, it's a lot of good. But when we take it to the extreme where we worship it, we worship all the credentialed things and all that, and then we stereotype, and then we count people out, and it's not based on spirituality. Sometimes the most spiritual people and artsy people don't fit into that mold. And they're the ones really, they're the glue. Like somebody on a basketball team that's the defensive player is the glue to the team. And so we got to quit counting them out, and I got to finish this before 30 seconds. It may be too long already. But we got to listen to our poets. We got, especially the spiritual ones. We need to listen to the philosophers, especially the spiritual ones who believe in Christ, because he's the only one with evidence of a second life. And so I'm going to end with that because I don't know if this is going to download. Sorry. And I don't mind telling on myself so much anymore for some things. But that's a part of society I disagree with, is our drug laws and the punishment specifically, and that we don't go after the dealing groups, because the dealing groups should be regulated, bottom line. So They should all be regulated for poison consistency and all that, and price gouging and stealing and everything, and raping and whatever else they do. Gang banging. All right, I didn't know it was going to go over 15 seconds. Oops. I was counting up to 100 while I was reading instead of 60. And I missed it. Oh well. There's a chance to stunt download. I didn't get to make the points I wanted. I outed myself and in there, but for a reason. So I took a risk. I outed myself on an issue I have, and I lose viewers for that, but I don't care what people think, honestly. I mean, I protect myself. I do my best to stay healthy. I'm a health nut. But I disagree. I think that people should be able to, they know when if you're like me and you can go 3 months or 6 months without medicine, or 2 months without chocolate. I know when I feel like I could use chocolate. And I usually still regret it after. I did a chocolate binge for the first time in a month and a half or two yesterday. And I somewhat regret doing it. Somewhat. I think it did help take me, help some stress I was dealing with. And that had to do with some pain and stuff I've been going through. But it also brought some extra pain, some recovery, may have slowed my metabolism. So I'm having to force myself to go on a harder diet because I want to hurry up and get in shape by a certain time frame. All right, but get back in top shape. Or get back in shape. I hadn't reached top shape. Try to get in top shape. Anyhow, so I got to end this, but I don't feel like I made my point all the way, but maybe I'll do other videos in the future that conclude this thought. But we tend to worship the rules instead of God, the God who made the rules and the proper purpose of the rules, and that's part of it. And I have something I used to call that when I was writing as Reality Harmonizer Bob. We're all ruled out. We've ruled ourselves out. So we got too many rules. I believe in being a nation of laws. They used to say that in Fox News sometimes, but you can't rule yourself out. Nobody's above the law. We're all above the law, in a sense, in one context. We're not immune to the consequences of the law, but we all have a choice to break the law. We have all broken the 10 Commandments in our minds sometimes. If you're angry, Jesus said, if you're angry, you're guilty of the sin of murder already, and go repent immediately against your own brother without a cause, particularly. So there is righteous anger, but which is not the same thing. So we've all lusted over something, coveted something, whether it was materialism or being attracted to somebody who is not your wife or your husband. And if you're single, I mean, you've gone overboard and wanted to be married too prematurely or whatever. We've all lusted in some way. And so, but we repent immediately. We don't carry through with it. So when lust has conceived, then it brings forth sin, as a Bible verse. So lust is not a sin if you catch it in time and don't covet. Basically, if you don't covet and get greedy with it, you haven't sinned yet. According to us, I believe that's pretty close. But, so I'm just going to close here. 1 John 4:8, he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love.